Good morning, everyone. And we were discussing yesterday uh, various rights which are given under the Constitution. And in this regard, we have discussed right to equality. These are the various rights which are given to the people under the right to equality. The first one is equality before law and equal protection of laws. I have discussed this with you. Then prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. Then equal access to shops, hotels, wells, tanks, bathing ghats, roads, etc. Then equality of opportunity in public employment, abolition of untouchability, and abolition of titles. These are the rights which are given to the people of India under right to equality. Now, after that, we were discussing right to freedom. Yesterday, what we discussed that how freedom and equality are related to each other. Freedom in the absence of equality is meaningless, and equality in the absence of freedom is also equally meaningless. So, there are various types of right to freedom which is given to which are provided by the Constitution. These are you can see protection of right to freedom of speech of expression. We are given right to freedom of speech and expression by the Constitution. We have right to assemble peacefully. We have right to form association or unions. We are free to move. We have right to move freely throughout the territory of India. We have right to reside and settle in any part of India. We have right to practice any profession or to carry on any occupation, trade or business. Other than these rights, we also have other right to freedom. Uh, this is the right in respect to arrested person. Whatever rights are given, protection in respect of conviction for offences, right to life and personal liberty, right to education, protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. These are the various rights which are given under right to freedom. Now we will discuss all these in detail. Okay. So first of all, our right to life and right to personal liberties. These are the rights which can be snatched from us only according to the procedure established by law. So the most important right is right to life. No citizen can be denied his or her life except by procedure as laid down under the law. And in the same way, no one can be denied his or her personal liberty. No one can be arrested. But what does it mean? No one can be denied of his personal liberty. It means that no one can be arrested without being told the ground for such an arrest. You must be aware that whenever a person is arrested, then he must be shown arrest warrant. He must be given the reason for which he is going to be arrested. Then, if the arrest has been done, if the person has been arrested, then he has the right to defend himself. And how he will defend himself? He will defend himself by a lawyer of his choice. There is also a provision in the constitution that if a person is not in such a economic condition that he can hire a lawyer, then the government provide them the lawyer, because he has the right to defend himself and no one can deprive him of this right. Then it is also mandatory for the police to take the arrested person to the magistrate within 24 hours of arrest. So these are the safeguards which is given to the arrested person. These are the rights of the arrested person. So, right is not our right to life is not only this key. We should we should not we must have the right to life. It has a wider application. With the interpretation of this right, the judiciary has included many things under the right to life, such as right to shelter, right to safe drinking water, right to livelihood. All these are included under right to life, because we won't be able to live our life in a dignified manner if we are not having if we are not having shelter, livelihood, or access to safe drinking water. So these are the important aspects of right to life. Then there is another uh, provision in our constitution, which we can say that mm, mm, uh, a limitation on the right to freedom, and that limitation is preventive detention. What happens in normal circumstances? What happens that when a person does commit some offense, then only he is arrested by the police. And our constitution provide so many safeguards, such as the person must be knowing the reason for his arrest, then he must be defended by a lawyer, then he must be presented before a magistrate within 24 hours of arrest. These all rights are given to the arrested person in normal circumstances. But there are some exception to this situation. There are some other situations in which we find that a person can be arrested not after doing the crime, but only because there is an apprehension that he or she is likely to engage in unlawful activity. It means that there is a doubt, apprehension. There is a doubt that the particular person may do something unlawful. It is the possibility. It is a possibility that the person can do some unlawful activity which will be harmful for the country or the society, and for that purpose, uh, before doing the crime, only on the basis of apprehension, that person is imprisoned for some time, and in that imprisonment, no right is given to the person. If someone is going to be detained only on the basis of apprehension, then he will not be given any reason for his arrest. He will not be given a chance to defend himself by a lawyer, and he will not be presented before the magistrate within 24 hours. All these rights are not given to the person who is detained, who is arrested only on the basis of apprehension, and this is called preventive detention. Detention has been done in order to prevent the crime, the crime which has not actually been occurred, but there is apprehension that the person can occur that crime, can commit that crime, and in order to prevent that crime, the detention has been taken place. This is called preventive detention. So the government, if the government feels that a person can be a threat to law and order or to the peace and security of the nation, it has the power to detain or arrest that person. This preventive detention can be done for 3 months. That is the maximum period for which a person can be detained. And after the passing of these 3 months, this the case must be brought before an advisory board, and the advisory board will review the situation, and accordingly it will take the decisions. Then it can be extended. The preventive detention, the period of detention can be extended after the review done by the advisory board. So what we feel about preventive detention. it is said that government can arrest can arrest any person only on the basis of apprehension if it is felt that or she can be a threat to law and order or to the peace and security of the nation. So it is in principle we can see that it is not bad. It is good. The person is arrested for the in the larger interest of the society, in the larger interest of the country. But actually, what happens that the government misuse this provision. This preventive detention has been misused by the government because government use it against people for reasons other than that which are really justified. Many times on the basis of a very unjustified reason the detention is being done, and it is misused by the government. So what we find that on the one hand the constitution is giving us right to life, and from the other hand it is taking away our right to life and liberty through this provision of preventive detention. Now there are other freedom also which we discussed earlier, that we have freedom to assemble peacefully. We have freedom to make organizations or assembly or unions. We have freedom to move from one place to another place. We have freedom to do any occupation in order to earn our livelihood. These all, and then we have freedom of speech and expression. What we find that these all freedoms are also not without any limitations. These freedoms are also not absolute, but there are so many limitations has been put on these freedoms. For example, we can see that we have right to freedom of speech and expression, but what we find that this freedom is subject to so many restrictions, such as public order, peace, and morality. So we have freedom to assemble, ठीक है, but what happens that the government may impose restrictions in certain areas, declaring the assembly of five or more persons as unlawful, and no one can question. Yes, it's not like that ki no one can question the act of the government. We can go to the court, but that is another matter. What happens that the government is empowered to impose restrictions on our freedom, and many times government misuse this freedom, and in this regard what we can say that what is important, if we really want to be free, if we really want to enjoy the freedom which is given by our constitution, we need to be aware and vigilant in regard to the to our rights, and we must protest against the acts of the government or acts of the administration. If the government is misusing its power, then people must be aware that the government is misusing its power, and we are deprived of our fundamental rights, and we have the power to protest against the activities of the government. So it we can say that continuous consciousness is very much important if we really want to be free. We must be aware that where the government is misusing its power and where we need to protest against the authorities of the government. And what we find that in Constituent Assembly also there were many members who were not happy with this type of restrictions on the rights of the people. Here is one example of Somnath Lahiri, who said, I am reading his statement. I feel that many of these fundamental rights have been framed from the point of view of a police constable. It means that the fundamental rights are not made for the people, are not provided for the people, but they have been framed from the viewpoint of a police constable. You will find that very minimum rights have been considered and are almost invariably followed by a proviso. Almost every article is followed by a proviso which takes away the rights almost completely. So what happens that the constitution gives us right, then it add a proviso, and through this proviso it takes away the right. Though we have right to freedom of movement, but in order to maintain peace and law and order, and in order to protect the morality, the government can restrict our freedom of movement. So in this way, what we see that the our rights are being denied to us. What should be our conception of fundamental rights? We want to incorporate every one of those rights which are people want to get. So this is the example of how dissatisfied were the members of some members of the Constituent Assembly over the restrictions which were imposed on the personal liberties of the people. Then what we find that there is rights of accused. Accused, there is very much need of right to accuse, because a person accused of various offences need to be protected, because there is a very much possibility of uh, misuse of power by the government. And one more thing which you must know, that when if someone is charged with some offense, uh, we feel that the person is guilty, but actually no one is guilty unless the court has found that person guilty of an offense. So it is important for a person to be guilty when the court decides accordingly. When the person is charged of some crime, then he is not guilty. He will be guilty only when the court gives its verdict regarding that. So it is very much important that a person accused of any crime must get adequate opportunity to defend himself or herself, and in uh, order to ensure a fair trial in court, the constitution has provided three rights to the accused. No, and these are following: no person would be punished for the same offense more than once. For the same offense, no person can be punished more than once. No law shall declare any action as illegal from a backdate. No law can be passed by no law can there can be no law which declare any action illegal from a backdate. The law should come into effect only from today or from the next day. It means it cannot be in effect from the backdate. Okay. And the next one is no person shall be asked to give evidence against himself or herself. Everyone has the right to protect himself, and no one can be forced to give evidence against himself or herself. So these are the rights of the people, right to freedom, which we people enjoy under the Constitution of India. Now we have another right. We are given another right, that is right against exploitation. First of all, we must know that who are exploited in a society. The So in a society, every time the vulnerable group, that is the poor, the children, the old age, all these are the people, are the groups of people who are vulnerable, and there is a very much possibility of exploitation of these group of people. So, what we need to protect the interest of these vulnerable group, and this is done by our constitution. Our constitution give us right against exploitation. In this section, we can see right against exploitation is there are prohibition of traffic in human beings and forced labor, and prohibition of employment of children in hazardous jobs. So there are two types of right against exploitation we have. One is traffic in human being, and the other one is for the uh, um, children below 14 years of age should not be engaged in hazardous activities. So, the what we find that bonded labor is a kind of exploitation which is experienced by many in our country, um, and this has been forced labor or begar. It has been prohibited by the constitution. Still, what we find that this kind of activity is in practice in our country. Our constitution completely prohibits the buying and selling of human beings, and for this traffic in human being, it means that there should not be any kind of buying or selling of human beings. Uh, and if there is any kind of activity is done, then it has been declared a crime, and now it is punishable. The Constitution also forbids employment of children below the age of 14 years in dangerous jobs like factories and mines. In our original Constitution, it was written that no children under the age of 14 should be engaged in any hazardous activities, and so they cannot be engaged in dangerous job like factories and mines. And now the constitution has been amended, and right to education has been incorporated in the constitution, and according to this right, um, free and compulsory education has been it has become the fundamental right of all the children below the age of 14 to get free and compulsory education. So now, earlier this right to education was not a fundamental right, and it was mentioned only in our directive principle of state policy, which is not legally enforceable. But now it is our fundamental right to have to gain free and compulsory education up to the age of 14. Now we are coming to another freedom, that is right to freedom of religion. Our constitution gives everyone the right to follow the religion of his or her choice. No one can force anyone to practice or follow any religion. Whatever religion we want to follow, we are completely free to follow, and this gives this makes democracy a real democracy, a meaningful democracy, because on the basis of religion, we find that in history, we find that there were so many atrocities were done on the basis of religion. There were rulers and emperors, not only in India but in the whole world. There were such rulers and emperors who did not allow people. of their countries to enjoy the right to freedom of religion. They forced people to follow the religion of their own, and the people who follow different religion from that of the ruler, then they were punished, they were persecuted, and many times they were forced to convert to the religion of the ruler. So it was the practice of the world. The world was under the monarchical system. This was very much in practice, and the people has suffered a lot because of this. But democracy, one of the most important basis of democracy is the freedom of religion, freedom to follow any religion, whatever religion one wants to follow. So this is the basis of democracy, and this is also the basis of secularism. So in our country, everyone is free to choose a religion and practice that religion. The state cannot force anyone to choose any particular religion or practice that religion, but we are completely free. Uh, mm, uh, Freedom of religion also includes the freedom of conscience. This means that a person may choose any religion or may choose not to follow any religion. It is not compulsory for a person to follow any religion. If someone does not want to choose any religion, so does not want to follow any religion, he is free for that also. So freedom of religion is also freedom of conscience, and under the freedom of religion, we have the freedom to profess, we have the freedom to follow, we have the freedom to propagate any religion. We can campaign our religion. We can make other people not forcefully, but we can convince them to change their religion. This is legal, but without any use of force or without any any kind of uh, temptation should not be given to the people in order to change their religion. But what we find that freedom of religion is also subject to certain limitations. The government can impose restriction on the practice of freedom of religion in order to protect public order, morality, and health. Here, what we find that government uh, has the power to interfere in the religious matter of any religion on the basis of protection of public order or morality or health. If the practices of any religion is causing public disorder, or if it is causing immorality, or if it is causing any kind of health related problems, then the government is free to interfere in the religious matter. It can impose restrictions also. So many times the government interfere in religious matter for eradicating various types of social evils in the religion which is existing. For example, in Hindu religion, there was practice of sati, and human sacrifice was also done. Bigamy was there. All these religious practices were all these religious practices were banned by the government. Why government has interfered in the matter of religion? When we have freedom of religion, we have freedom to follow any religion, freedom to practice any religion, then the government should not interfere in the religious matter. But actually, this is not. This will not be a right way to think. Actually, government can interfere in order to for the positive reason. Government is interfering in order to root out the social evils. For example, sati practice was there, and this practice was completely against the women of the society, and the government has to interfere in the matter in order to protect the interest of the women. And likewise, government interfere only for the positive reason, not to restrict the freedom. The purpose is not negative, the purpose is positive. So the limitation on are very much relevant. It should be there. Nowadays there is so much conflict regarding triple talaq matter. It was said that government was bringing that law which was prohibiting the practice of triple talaq among Muslims, and it came under huge controversy. But it was said that the government is interfering in the religious matters, and it should not interfere in those matters. But the government was interfering for the purpose of protection of the interest of the Muslim women. So this kind of interference, whenever government interfere in the religious matter, it produce a lot of tension among the between the people of that religion and government. And people feel that the government is interfering in their religious matter. So it is a bone of contention always, and still government does this for the in the larger interest of the society. So our constitution also guarantee the right to propagate one's religion. Any person is free to propagate his or her religion, and in this way, as I told you earlier, that this does not mean that anyone can force anyone to change his or her religion. Yes, and everyone is free to persuade people to convert from one religion to another. They are free to persuade. They can convince other people to change their religion. So there are what we feel that many times conversion of religion took place on the basis of intimidation or inducement. There are financial help is the people, uh, given by the people to whom to those who are ready to change their religion, or many times they are being threatened so that they can change their religion. So this is also a contentious issue, and our constitution does not allow forcible conversion. It only gives us the right to spread information about our religion, and thus attract others to it. We can only inform the people about the religion, and it is up to the people they want to change the religion or not. So there should not be any kind of intimidation or inducement, but in practice what we find that all these things are done by the people, and this has caused a lot of conflict. So for today's class this is enough, and now we will meet together tomorrow.